The man sat down in the exam chair. The nurse smiled softly and whispered, "It's just a checkup." But a few minutes later, she quietly closed the door and locked it. A small sound, but enough to make his heart skip. Her eyes looked at him differently now, gentle, but layered with something he couldn't name. The air turned unusually still, just the two of them in a sealed room. Why did she lock the door? And what was about to happen to him? Evan Carter had learned to move through mornings like machinery. Wake at 6:30, make breakfast, pack Lily's lunch, brush her hair, drive her to school, wave as she disappeared through the glass doors with her pink backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Then the quiet returned, and with it, the weight. He sat in his truck for a moment after she left, hands still on the wheel. The school parking lot emptied around him. Other parents drove off to jobs, to errands, to lives that seemed to flow with less effort. Evan just sat there, feeling the tightness in his chest that had been there for months, maybe years. He had an appointment that morning, the kind he couldn't skip, the kind that kept him functional. The clinic was 20 minutes away, tucked into a low brick building near the edge of town. It wasn't a hospital. It wasn't urgent care. It was the sort of place people went when their problems weren't visible but still very real. Mental health services, the sign said. Evan had been coming once a month for over a year now. The doctor was kind, but clinical. The sessions helped, barely. What helped more was the routine, the act of showing up, the proof that he was still trying. He parked in the back lot and walked in through the side entrance. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. A few people sat scattered across the chairs, staring at phones or magazines they weren't reading. Evan checked in at the front desk. The receptionist smiled without looking up. He sat near the window and waited. 10 minutes later, a woman in scrubs appeared at the doorway and called his name. Her voice was calm, steady. Evan stood and followed her down the hallway. He had seen her before, but only in passing. She usually worked the front or handled intake forms. Today, she was the one leading him back. Her name was Nora Bennett. He knew that much from the badge clipped to her pocket. She moved with the kind of ease that came from years of doing the same tasks without thinking. But there was something else, too. A gentleness in the way she held herself, like she understood that everyone who walked through those doors was carrying something heavy. She led him into a small exam room at the end of the hall. It was plain. White walls, a narrow exam table covered in paper, a chair in the corner, a blood pressure cuff hanging from a hook. Nora gestured toward the chair. "Go ahead and have a seat," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. Evan sat. He felt the familiar tension rise in his shoulders. He hated these rooms, hated the vulnerability of sitting still while someone else moved around him, checking things, asking questions. He wasn't good with closeness, hadn't been for a long time. Nora pulled a rolling stool over and sat across from him. She opened a folder and glanced at his chart. Her eyes moved over the page quickly. But she didn't seem rushed. She looked up at him with a small smile. "It's just a checkup today," she said. "Nothing major. I'll take your vitals, ask a few questions, and then you'll see the doctor." Evan nodded. He didn't trust his voice yet. Nora reached for the blood pressure cuff and began unwrapping it. She moved closer, leaning in slightly to fit the cuff around his arm. Her hands were warm, steady. She worked without hesitation, adjusting the fabric, positioning the stethoscope, and then her fingers brushed against his wrist. It wasn't much, just a graze, skin on skin. But it lasted longer than it should have. A second, maybe two. Long enough for Evan to notice, long enough for his breath to catch in his throat. Nora didn't pull away immediately. Her hand stayed there, light and deliberate. Before she finally adjusted the cuff and stepped back, She didn't say anything, but when she looked at him again, there was something different in her eyes. Not intrusive, not inappropriate, just aware. Evan swallowed hard. His heart was beating faster now, and he knew she could hear it through the stethoscope. He felt exposed, stupid, like his body had betrayed him over something so small. Nora pressed the button on the cuff, and it began to inflate. She watched the gauge, her expression calm, but Evan could feel her attention on him, not in a way that made him uncomfortable, in a way that made him feel seen. When the cuff released, she wrote something down on the chart. Then she looked at him again. "Your blood pressure's a little elevated," she said gently. "Are you feeling okay?" Evan nodded too quickly. "Yeah." "Fine." She tilted her head slightly, studying him, not judging, just noticing. "It's okay if you're not," she said. "A lot of people feel anxious in here." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Nora stood and moved toward the counter. She washed her hands in the small sink, drying them slowly with a paper towel. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Evan watched her without meaning to. There was something about the way she moved, unhurried, deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. She turned back to him and leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely. "You've been coming here for a while now," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Evan said. "About a year." She nodded. "That takes commitment. Not everyone keeps showing up." He didn't know how to respond to that either. He wasn't used to people acknowledging effort. Most of the time, people just assumed he was fine because he kept moving, because he didn't fall apart in public. Nora's eyes softened. "Do you have support at home? Family? Friends?" Evan hesitated. The question felt bigger than it sounded. "I have a daughter," he said quietly. Nora's expression shifted, not with surprise, with something warmer. Understanding, maybe. "How old?" she asked. 7. She smiled, a real smile this time. "That's a good age." Evan felt something loosen in his chest, just a little. "Yeah," he said. She's everything." Nora nodded slowly. She didn't push, didn't ask more, just let the words sit between them. Then she straightened and walked toward the door. Evan thought she was leaving, thought the moment was over. But instead, she reached for the handle and closed the door, not all the way, just enough to block the view from the hallway. Then she turned the lock. The sound was small, a soft click, but it cut through the quiet like a knife. Evan's pulse spiked. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her. Nora turned back to face him. Her expression hadn't changed, still calm, still gentle, but there was something in her eyes now, something deeper. "The hallway is getting noisy," she said softly. "I want you to feel comfortable today." Evan's throat went dry. He didn't know if that was true, didn't know if the hallway was noisy at all. He hadn't heard anything, but he also didn't know what to say, what to do. Nora walked back toward him slowly. She didn't sit down, just stood a few feet away, her hands resting loosely at her sides. "You seem tense," she said. Her voice was careful, not invasive, just observant. Evan swallowed. "I'm fine." She watched him for a moment longer. Then she took one more step closer. "You don't have to be," she said quietly. The words hit him harder than they should have. He looked away, staring at the floor. His jaw tightened. He didn't know what she was doing. Didn't know if this was part of the routine or something else entirely. But he felt it. The shift. The weight of her attention. The quiet intensity of being seen by someone who wasn't afraid to look. Nora didn't push further. She just stood there, waiting, giving him space to choose. To stay closed off or to let something in. Evan's hands loosened on the armrests. He looked up at her again. Her eyes were still on him. Warm. Patient. Not demanding anything. Just offering something he hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. He didn't say anything, but he didn't look away either. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Evan Carter let himself be seen. Nora moved back toward the counter and pulled a small pen light from the drawer. She clicked it on and off once, testing it. The sound was soft, but deliberate. Evan watched her hands. They were steady, confident. Nothing about her suggested hesitation. She turned back to him and stepped closer again. "I'm going to check your pupils," she said. "Just look straight ahead." Evan nodded. His throat felt tight. He kept his eyes forward as she leaned in. The light was bright, but brief. She moved it slowly from one eye to the other, her face inches from his. He could smell something faint. Lavender, maybe. Or soap. Something clean and warm. When she finished, she clicked the light off and straightened. But she didn't step back right away. She stayed close, looking at him with that same quiet attention. "You're doing fine," she said softly. Evan didn't know if she meant the exam or something else. He didn't ask. Nora set the pen light down and reached for the stethoscope again. She looped it around her neck and sat back down on the stool, rolling closer to him. This time, she didn't avoid his eyes. "I'm going to listen to your heart and lungs," she said. "It'll be quick." She pressed the cold metal to his chest through his shirt. Evan flinched slightly at the temperature. Nora noticed. "Sorry," she said. "I should have warmed it up first." She pulled the stethoscope back and rubbed the metal between her palms for a few seconds. Then, she placed it against his chest again, gentler this time. Her hand rested there, steadying the instrument. Evan felt the pressure of her touch through the fabric. Light, but unmistakable. She listened in silence. Evan tried to breathe normally, but his chest felt tight. His heart was beating too fast, and he knew she could hear it. He hated that. Hated how his body gave him away. After a moment, Nora pulled the stethoscope back. She looked at him, not at the chart. Her expression was careful. "Your heart rate's elevated," she said quietly. "Are you sure you're okay?" Evan exhaled slowly. He didn't know how to explain it. Didn't know if he should. "I'm just—" He stopped, started again. "I'm a little tense." Nora tilted her head slightly. "Tense?" He looked down at his hands. They were gripping the armrests again. He forced himself to relax them. "It's been a while since anyone—" He trailed off. The words felt too big, too revealing. Nora waited. She didn't fill the silence, didn't rush him, just sat there, giving him space to finish. Evan took a breath and met her eyes. "It's been a while since anyone touched me," he said. His voice was quieter than he wanted it to be. The room went still. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. Like the air had thickened around them. Nora didn't react right away. She just looked at him. Not with pity. Not with judgment. Just with something that felt like understanding. Then she set the stethoscope aside and leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees. Her hands folded together loosely. She was close enough now that Evan could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. The way her expression softened when she wasn't trying to be professional. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "That must be hard." Evan didn't know what to do with that. No one had said it like that before. Not with that kind of weight. Not like it mattered. "It's fine," he said automatically. "I'm used to it." Nora shook her head slowly. "You shouldn't have to be." The words landed like a blow. Not painful, just unexpected. Evan felt something crack open inside him, something he'd been keeping shut for a long time. He looked away again, blinking hard. His jaw tightened. He didn't want to cry. Not here, Not in front of her. Nora reached out and touched his hand, just lightly. Her fingers rested against his knuckles, warm and steady. Evan felt the contact like electricity. His skin tingled where she touched him. It wasn't just physical. It was the meaning behind it, the intentionality. She wasn't checking his pulse. She wasn't adjusting equipment. She was just touching him because he needed it. "You deserve to be treated gently," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Evan's breath hitched. He stared at her hand on his. It had been so long since someone touched him like that. Like he mattered. Like he was worth the effort. He didn't pull away. He just sat there, feeling the warmth of her skin against his, and let himself believe it for a moment. Nora didn't move. She stayed right there, her hand on his, her eyes on his face. She watched him with the kind of attention that felt almost sacred, like she was holding space for something fragile. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked softly. Evan swallowed hard. He didn't know if he did. Didn't know if he could, but something in him wanted to try. "I told you I have a daughter," he said finally. Nora nodded. "You did. Her name's Lily." He said it carefully, like he was testing the weight of it. "She's 7, smart, funny, stronger than I'll ever be." Nora smiled faintly. "She sounds amazing." "She is?" Evan's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. "I raise her on my own." Nora's expression shifted, not with surprise, with recognition, like she'd suspected as much. "That's not easy," she said. "No." Evan shook his head. "It's not." He looked down at their hands. Nora still hadn't pulled hers away. Her thumb moved slightly, brushing against his knuckle. The gesture was so small, but it felt enormous. "Her mom left when Lily was 1, he said. The words came out flat. Practiced. Like he'd said them so many times they'd lost their sting. But they hadn't. Not really. Nora's fingers tightened slightly around his, just enough to let him know she was listening. "She didn't want to be a mother," Evan continued. "Didn't want the responsibility. Didn't want us." He stopped, took a breath. "She left in the middle of the night, packed a bag and just disappeared." Nora didn't say anything. She just kept her hand on his, steady and warm. Evan's throat tightened. He hadn't talked about this in years, hadn't let himself go back to that night. But now, sitting here with Nora's hand on his, he couldn't stop the memories. "I woke up around 3 in the morning," he said quietly. "Lily was crying. I went to check on her, and when I came back, I noticed the closet was open. Half her clothes were gone. Her suitcase. Her shoes." He blinked hard, staring at the wall. "I called her phone, over and over. She didn't answer. I checked everywhere. The bathroom, the garage. I thought maybe she'd just gone out. Maybe she needed air. But deep down, I knew." Nora's hand tightened on his again. Her other hand came up and rested on his forearm, gentle and grounding. "The next morning, I got a text," Evan said. His voice was barely audible now. It just said, "I can't do this. I'm sorry." That was it. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. He looked up at Nora, and her eyes were glassy. She didn't try to hide it. "I tried to hold it together," Evan said. "For Lily. But it's been 6 years, and I still don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I'm enough." His voice broke on the last word. He hated himself for it. Hated how weak he sounded. But he couldn't stop now. "There was this moment," Evan continued, his voice shaking. "Lily was about 3. We were at the park, and she saw another little girl with her mom. The mom was pushing her on the swing, and Lily just stopped. She stared at them for a long time. Then she looked up at me and asked, 'Where's my mommy?'" Evan's breath caught. The memory was sharp, even after all these years. "I didn't know what to say," he admitted. I told her that her mommy had to go away, but that I loved her enough for both of us. She just nodded. She didn't cry. She just said, "Okay, Daddy," and went back to playing. But I saw it in her eyes. She knew something was missing. Nora's eyes filled with tears. One slipped down her cheek and she wiped it away quickly. "You didn't fail her," Nora said, her voice thick. "You stayed." "That's what matters." Evan shook his head. "I don't let people in," he said quietly. "Because every time I do, they leave. And I can't do that to Lily again. I can't let her get attached to someone who's just going to walk away." Nora's thumb brushed over his knuckles again, slow and deliberate. "You're protecting her," Nora said softly. "That's what good parents do." Evan shook his head. "I'm not protecting her. I'm just scared." Nora didn't argue. She just looked at him with those warm, steady eyes. "Fear doesn't make you a bad father," she said. "It makes you human." Evan felt the tears coming before he could stop them. They blurred his vision, hot and unwelcome. He tried to blink them away, but one slipped down his cheek anyway. He wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. Nora didn't look away. She just kept her hand on his. "It's okay," she said quietly. Evan shook his head. "It's not." "It is." Her voice was firmer now. Not harsh, just certain. "You're allowed to feel this." Evan closed his eyes. He didn't want to fall apart. Not here. Not now. But he was so tired. Tired of holding everything together. Tired of pretending he was fine when he wasn't. Nora shifted slightly, moving closer. Her hand left his, and for a moment, Evan felt the loss of it like a cold wind. But then she reached up and touched his shoulder. Gently, carefully. "You're not alone," she said. Evan opened his eyes. She was looking at him with something he hadn't seen in years. Not pity. Not obligation. Just genuine care. "You don't even know me," he said, his voice rough. "I know enough," Nora said. "I know you're trying. I know you're carrying more than you should. And I know you deserve someone to tell you that you're doing a good job." Evan's breath caught. He didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to respond to that kind of kindness. So he just nodded. Nora's hand stayed on his shoulder for a moment longer. Then she pulled back slowly, giving him space. She sat back on the stool, her hands folding together in her lap. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Evan nodded again. Nora looked down at her hands. Her expression shifted, becoming quieter, more guarded. "I'm not great at opening up either," she said. "I've spent most of my life taking care of other people. It's easier that way. Safer." Evan watched her. He could see the weight in her eyes now, the same kind of weight he carried. "A few years ago," Nora continued, "I was assigned to care for a woman who came in with late-stage cancer. Her name was Margaret. She didn't have any family, no one to sit with her, no one to hold her hand during treatments. So I did." She looked up at Evan, her eyes glassy. "I spent months with her," Nora said. "Every shift, every day. We talked about everything. Her childhood, her regrets, the life she wished she'd lived. She told me once that I reminded her of the daughter she never had." Nora's voice broke slightly. She took a breath and steadied herself. "Margaret was sharp, funny. Even when she was in pain, she made jokes. She said she wanted to make sure I remembered her as someone who laughed, not someone who suffered." Evan felt his chest tighten. He knew where this was going. "One night, I was working a late shift," Nora continued. "Margaret called for me. She was scared. She knew she didn't have much time left. I sat with her. Held her hand. Told her she wasn't alone." Nora's tears fell freely now. She didn't wipe them away. "She died an hour later," Nora said quietly, "with her hand in mine. And I wasn't ready for it. I thought I would be. I thought I was prepared. But I wasn't." She looked at Evan, her face raw with grief. "After that, I stopped letting people in," she said. "I told myself it was easier, that it hurt less. But it doesn't. It just makes everything feel empty." Evan didn't know what to say. He just sat there, watching her, feeling the echo of his own pain in her words. "I'm telling you this," Nora said, looking at him again, "because I understand. I understand what it's like to be afraid of losing someone, to protect yourself by keeping everyone at a distance." She leaned forward slightly, her voice softer now. "But I also know that's no way to live." Evan's throat tightened. He felt the truth of it settle over him like a weight. "I don't know how to do it differently," he admitted. Nora smiled faintly. "Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out." The words hung between them, fragile and tentative. Evan didn't know if he believed them, didn't know if he could. But for the first time in a long time, he wanted to try. They sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward, just still. Both of them holding the weight of what they'd shared. Then Nora stood up slowly and walked back to the counter. She picked up the chart and made a few notes. Evan watched her, feeling the strange pull of connection between them. It wasn't something he could name, wasn't something he understood, but it was there. When Nora turned back to him, her expression had softened again. "I think we're done here," she said. "But before you go..." She walked over to him and crouched down slightly so they were at eye level. Her hands rested lightly on the armrests of the chair, close to his butt, not touching. "I want you to know something," she said quietly. "You're not too much. You're not too broken. And you're not alone." Evan felt his chest tighten again. He wanted to believe her, wanted to hold on to those words like a lifeline. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely audible. Nora smiled, a real smile this time, warm and unguarded. "You're welcome," she said. She stood and walked back to the door. Evan thought she was going to unlock it, thought the moment was over. But instead, she turned back to him one last time. "If you ever need to talk," she said, "I'm here." Evan nodded. He didn't trust his voice anymore. Nora unlocked the door and opened it slowly. The sounds of the clinic flooded back in. Voices, footsteps, the hum of machines. The spell was broken, but the weight of what had passed between them remained. Evan stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. He walked toward the door, but before he stepped through, he turned back. "Nora," he said. She looked at him, her hand still on the doorknob. "Thank you," he said again, "for seeing me." Nora's eyes softened. She nodded once. "Always," she said quietly. Evan walked out into the hallway. His heart was still racing. His hands were still shaking. But for the first time in years, he felt something other than fear. He felt hope. Evan stood in the hallway for a moment, unsure of what to do next. The door to the exam room was still open behind him. He could hear Nora moving inside, organizing supplies, closing drawers, normal sounds, professional sounds. But nothing about what had just happened felt normal. He walked toward the waiting room slowly, his mind replaying everything. The touch, the words, the way she looked at him like he mattered. He didn't know what to make of it, didn't know if he was reading too much into it or not enough. He checked out at the front desk and walked to his truck. The sun was brighter now, mid-morning light cutting through the windshield. He sat behind the wheel and stared at nothing. His hands rested on his lap, still trembling slightly. He thought about Nora's words. "You're not alone." But he was, wasn't he? Evan drove home in silence. The radio stayed off. The world outside passed by in a blur. He pulled into the driveway and sat there for a few minutes, engine idling. The house was quiet, empty. Lily wouldn't be home for hours. He went inside and made coffee he didn't drink. sat at the kitchen table and stared at his phone. He thought about texting someone, a friend, a coworker, anyone. But there was no one. Not really. He'd cut everyone out years ago. It was easier that way. Safer. But now it just felt lonely. The hours dragged. Evan cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, paid bills, anything to keep his hands busy. But his mind kept drifting back to the clinic, to Nora, to the way she'd held his hand, the way she'd looked at him. By the time he left to pick up Lily, he still hadn't made sense of it. He waited in the school pickup line, watching the doors. Kids streamed out in clusters, backpacks bouncing, voices loud and chaotic. Lily appeared near the back, her pink backpack dragging behind her. She spotted the truck and waved, her face lighting up. Evan waved back. His chest loosened slightly. She climbed into the back seat and buckled herself in. "How was school?" Evan asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Good," Lily said. She pulled a crumpled drawing from her backpack and held it up. "I made this for you." Evan took it at the next stoplight. It was a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small, a house in the background, a sun in the corner. "It's us," Lily said proudly. Evan felt his throat tighten. "It's perfect, sweetheart." "Thank you." They drove home, and Lily chattered about her day. A boy in her class had brought a lizard for show and tell. Her teacher had let them read outside. She'd made a new friend named Emma. Evan listened, nodding in the right places, but his mind was elsewhere. That night, after dinner and homework and bedtime stories, Evan sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet again. Lily was asleep upstairs. The TV was on, but he wasn't watching it. He kept thinking about what Nora had said, about opening up, about letting people in. He didn't know if he could. Didn't know if it was even worth trying. But he also knew he couldn't keep living like this, couldn't keep carrying everything alone. He stayed up late, long after he should have gone to bed. His mind wouldn't settle. He replayed the morning over and over. The locked door, the touch, the words. By the time he finally went upstairs, it was past midnight. He checked on Lily, pulling her blanket up over her shoulders. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. Evan went to his own room and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Around 2 a.m, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Small ones. He sat up just as Lily appeared in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit clutched in one hand. "Daddy?" Her voice was soft and sleepy. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Evan asked, sitting up fully. Lily walked over to the bed and climbed up without waiting for permission. She curled into his side, her head resting on his shoulder. "You were awake," she said. "I could hear you moving around." Evan wrapped an arm around her. "I'm okay, just thinking." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at him, her eyes wide and serious. "Are you sad?" she asked. Evan's chest tightened. He didn't want to lie to her. But he also didn't want to burden her with things she shouldn't have to carry. "A little," he admitted. "But it's nothing for you to worry about." Lily frowned. She shifted so she was sitting up, facing him. "Is it because you don't have a grown-up to talk to?" she asked. Evan blinked. "What do you mean?" "Like how I have Emma at school," Lily said. "And you have me. But you don't have a grown-up friend. Or a girlfriend." Evan didn't know what to say. He hadn't expected that. "I'm okay, Lily," he said gently. "I have you. That's all I need." Lily shook her head. "But you're sad, Daddy. I can tell." Evan swallowed hard. He hated that she noticed. Hated that he couldn't hide it better. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad," he said. "But it doesn't mean anything's wrong. It's just life." Lily looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his. "I wish you had someone," she said quietly. Like how my friends have moms and dads. You only have me." Evan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He blinked them back. "You're more than enough," he said, his voice rough. Lily shook her head again. "But I'm just a kid. You need a grown-up." Evan pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. She hugged him back, her arms wrapping around his neck. "I don't want you to be lonely," Lily whispered. Evan closed his eyes. The tears came anyway, silent and hot. He didn't let her see, just held her close and let himself feel it. "I'm not lonely," he lied. "Not when I have you." But Lily pulled back and looked at him, her eyes too knowing for a 7-year-old. "It's okay if you want a girlfriend, Daddy," she said. "I wouldn't be mad." Evan's breath hitched. He didn't know what to say. "I see the other kids with their moms," Lily continued. "And sometimes I wish I had one too. Not because you're not enough, but because it would be nice." Evan felt his heart crack open. He wiped at his eyes quickly, trying to hold it together. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know if I can do that." "Why not?" Lily asked. "Because I'm scared," Evan admitted. The words came out before he could stop them. "I'm scared of letting someone in and having them leave, like your mom did." Lily frowned. "But not everyone leaves." Evan didn't know how to respond to that. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that somewhere, someone would stay. But he didn't. Lily reached up and touched his face, her small hand resting against his cheek. "You're a good daddy," she said, "and you deserve to be happy." Evan's tears fell freely now. He pulled her close again, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him together. Because she was. "I love you, Lily," he whispered. "I love you too, Daddy," she said. "And I promise I won't be sad if you find someone. I'll be happy. Because you'll be happy." Evan didn't respond. He just held her, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. Eventually, Lily fell asleep in his arms. Evan didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the dark room, thinking about everything she'd said. By the time morning came, he'd made a decision. The next afternoon, Evan stood outside a small coffee shop near the lake. The sun was warm, the air clean. He held a piece of paper in his hand. The one Nora had slipped into his jacket pocket as he left the clinic. He hadn't noticed it until he got home. Just an address and a time. 2 o'clock. He checked his watch. It was 1:58. He almost turned around, almost got back in his truck and drove away. But then he thought about Lily, about what she'd said, about the drawing she'd made. He thought about Nora, about the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd made him feel seen. He took a breath and walked inside. The coffee shop was small and quiet. A few people sat scattered around, reading or working on laptops. Evan scanned the room and saw Nora sitting near the window. She was staring out at the lake, a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked up as he approached, and her face softened into a smile. "You came," she said. Evan nodded. He didn't trust his voice yet. Nora gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." Evan sat. The table was small, intimate. He could see the faint lines around her eyes, the way her hair caught the sunlight. "I wasn't sure if you would," Nora said quietly. "I wasn't either," Evan admitted. Nora smiled faintly. "But you're here." "Yeah." Evan looked down at his hands. "I'm here." They sat in silence for a moment, not uncomfortable, just quiet. Then Evan heard small footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Lily standing near the door, her pink backpack on her shoulders. She looked nervous. Evan's eyes widened. "Lily, I told you to wait in the truck." Lily shook her head. "I wanted to meet her." Nora looked between them, surprise flickering across her face. Then she smiled, warm and genuine. "Hi," Nora said gently. "You must be Lily." Lily nodded shyly. She walked over slowly, stopping next to Evan's chair. "Daddy said you're nice," Lily said quietly. Nora's smile widened. She leaned forward slightly, meeting Lily's eyes. "Thank you," Nora said. "That means a lot. And you're very beautiful." Lily's cheeks flushed. She smiled and looked up at Evan. "Can I sit with you?" Lily asked. Evan nodded. Lily climbed into the chair next to him, her feet swinging above the floor. Nora watched them both, her expression soft. She looked at Evan, and something passed between them. Something quiet and certain. "So," Nora said, her voice light, "what do you like to do, Lily?" Lily launched into a story about her drawings and her friends and the lizard from show and tell. Nora listened intently, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. Evan watched them. Watched the way Nora looked at his daughter, the way Lily smiled at her, the way something warm and fragile began to bloom between them. He didn't know what would happen next, didn't know if this would last or if it would fall apart like everything else. But for the first time in years, he let himself hope. The three of them sat together by the window, sunlight streaming in, the world outside quiet and still. And for a moment, Evan Carter felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt whole,